Thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Perpetua.
But let's get right into this. What was your initial reaction to this? I mean, the 31 rollbacks and all.
It's saddening, it's unfortunate, and I'm not even sure why people are not talking about it, because, again, it could align with the promises of President Trump, but what does it mean for the rest of the world? What does it mean for America itself? For America, they've said that majorly it will unleash the American energy to lower costs for American families and all. But when you think about the rest of the world, for us in Africa, for instance, the developing nations, we are the receiving end. Every target that has been set around the Paris Agreement may fail if we continue on this trajectory, right? Because while it may mean some sort of immediate benefits or gains from an economic point of view for America, but for them too, they should expect some sort of climate disaster. You should expect some reputational damage. If you think about it, for instance, the power and the transport industry in the U.S. generates about 50% of its greenhouse gas emissions, and we don't really have borders to sharing the emissions to the rest of the world. When these disasters happen, they also then trickle down to every part of the world because we are just a global village, so to speak. So it's unfortunate, but it may not be all poor because there are consequences. It could mean good for some other parts of the world, depending on how we turn things around.
All right, maybe we're the ones, hyperventilated. I mean, because let's look at some of the things he said. He said alongside President Trump, I'm quoting Zeldin now, alongside President Trump, we are living up to our promises to unleash American energy, which we've talked about, lower cost for Americans, revitalize the American auto industry, and work hand in hand with our state partners to advance our shared missions. Now, coming from the EPA Administrator Zeldin, I mean, he clearly believes this is in line with its core mandate. So is there a possibility we are the ones probably missing something?
Well, it's really about us thinking about, what the real issue is. When we set out to have agreements such as the Paris Agreement to deal with climate change issues, are these real issues or they are issues that are just made up? Are they imagined issues? To my mind, they are real issues. We have them present with us. Sometimes you can't predict the weather conditions. It's impacting on agricultural activities. It's impacting on the suit that you find in some parts where you see a lot of, crude exploration happening. So these are really issues that are with us. Are we losing out? Are we missing some other things? I think for the U.S. and for President Trump at this point, it's about the economic gains. It's about making things go well for them from the point of, I would say a race to the bottom, if I may borrow those words, right? Because in the long run, can we have sustainability merge with doing business in such a manner that it allows the future generations to continue to benefit from whatever it is that we have as resources today? That's where the rest of the world is going. China is implementing some reporting standards. In Nigeria, where here we have said, we want to adopt IFRS S1 and S2. Several other parts of the world are doing things in such a way. So I wouldn't think that the U.S. is the only right-thinking country at this point. It's just a case of what's the priority, right? And if you think about the priority, like I said earlier, there are economic consequences to these things. What it would mean is that, we don't have to slam so much of penalties on gas or crude oil manufacturing companies or production companies, for instance. What does that mean for the rest of the world? Countries like Brazil or India may also weaken their regulations because they want to compete. They want to have an average cost that is competitive to whatever the U.S. is going to provide. And so it becomes a race to the bottom. But what does that mean for the rest of the world? We all share in the pollution effects that we get in the long run, and that's not necessarily good for the rest of humanity.
Right. So when we count the cost, is it actually cheaper to sort of, keep all of these regulations at the end of the day? Because, I mean, when you look at that statement, they were very keen on how that this affects production, affects prices, affects jobs, how that it's taking a toll on American families. So does it seem that maybe the whole world is actually, overstating or overpricing all of these?
Well, it really depends on which side of the fence you belong. But what I would think is that depending on the reactions from several stakeholders on this, for instance, those who are heavily invested in the renewable energies market, what you would expect going forward is that they will begin to do things in a more cost-effective manner because they also have the polluting energies to deal with and to compete with. And so, do they want to also evolve better, greener technologies that will be easy to adopt and cheaper and more efficient for people to adopt, and so I think it's really a free market that the US is pushing for. It's not altogether bad, right? It's a free market where everyone then chooses what they want to do, and then it forces people who are already doing things sustainably to say, do we really need to change our business model, or do we need to do things in a more pragmatic and cost-efficient manner? And as such, it could also mean that going forward, we should expect to get some of these EV vehicles maybe for lower cost, because again, they will be forced to do it for cheaper. So it could just mean some good for the rest of the world. It's either we're getting some political pressures from some other parts of the world to get the US to upturn its decision, or then we have some sort of resistance from an economic point of view where people are then taking decisions that will benefit everyone in a very cost-efficient manner going forward.
All right, so I'd like you to talk to us about, the likely implications of these things, because we're looking at 31 stuff. I mean, 31 regulations that were rolled back. Talk to us about the implications, and if you can also tell us, the most concerning for you of the 31 rollbacks we saw.
Okay, so number one is that the US is likely to become a very big outlier. Right. Other nations are likely to strengthen their climate actions. If you think about it, like I mentioned earlier, China is implementing rules. Japan is also saying, oh, I want you to report things better with respect to sustainability. The EU, for instance, continuing its move, even though it's also relooking its supply driven regulations around sustainability to ensure that they have partners in the rest of the world. So it might just be that it's the US against the rest of the world, and it's now about what the US seeks to do and what the rest of the world seeks to do in reaction to that. And so for me, the most impactful would be that oil and gas companies, for instance, in the US, will be encouraged to just do things in a way that could be disturbing to the environment. And one thing that could happen from that is the fallout of some serious climate disasters going forward. And by then, US will then realize that what they've really done, it's not altogether nice, right, to the rest of the world. And then the rest of the world would also be demanding some sort of climate justice, right? So if I say what's most important for me, it means that, for instance, in Nigeria, too, we need to be looking at our budgets. How are we able to maximize? Because what this is also saying is that the cost of crude per barrel could be lowered, because that's the essence of what the Trump administration is trying to drive at. So what's the economic sustainability for us in this part of the world? And how does all of this impact on the pollution on the environment, and how does it impact on our agricultural sector? Because again, these things have impact on the weather conditions that are very important to how well we do with respect to agriculture and every other part of our economy.
Well, I do not think the rest of the world would go to bed while America keeps polluting, the world. But let's close with this in 30 seconds, if you can give me an answer on this. If the United States EPA was to create a balance, what will your recommendation be? Because on the one hand, they're trying to ensure lower cost for producers and lower, cost for even consumers.
Well, I would say that while some people may jump at that, it's not sustainable. We must look at these issues from a point of where do we go going forward? And more importantly, Are there scientific basis for us to say that there are climate challenges that we face? What we need to be doing is climate resilience, climate adaptation, rather than saying that, oh, you know what, we're going to shut down the economy. We're not going to shut down the economy, but at the same time, we must do things in such a manner that we will be able to continue to benefit from those resources. And that's what I think the U.S. should stand for.
All right, thank you so much, Temitope Kolade, Associate Director, Oil, Gas and Power, Andersen Nigeria, for coming on the show and for sharing your thoughts with us.